I'm gonna be honest, I could never get into Power Rangers as a kid, even though I did fall within the target age group. The reason is because when I was a kid, it didn't look good that a live action show was more immature and playful than the cartoons we used to watch. He-Man, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Batman the Animated Series. These cartoons, despite having corny origins, were taken very seriously in my generation, and Power Rangers in comparison just seemed way too childish. That alone was enough to put me off as a kid. However, now I am more accepting of live action stuff being enjoyably over the top. So, now that you know my brief history with the Power Rangers, let's get this battle started. Centuries ago, a legendary interdimensional being known as Zordon came to the city of Angel Grove to establish a command center for his never-ending struggle against evil. With the aid of his trusted assistant Alpha 5, the noble master sought out 6 extraordinary teenagers and gave them the power to transform into a superhuman fighting force. In time of great need, the young heroes could use their powers to call upon colossal assault vehicles known as Zords, and the identity of the 6 remained a guarded secret. Today, that tradition continues. Now you might be thinking, Eric, that sounds incredibly stupid. Well, don't look at me, I'm just reading what the opening text crawl says. The story's all there. In the reboot, 5 teenagers find these crystals, and it just so happens that they have been chosen to be the next generation of Power Rangers who must defeat foreign threats against their planet. And incidentally, an old enemy that killed the previous Rangers called Rita has returned. Thus, the teenagers need to figure out how to use their new powers so they can stop her before she destroys the world, or part of it. Now, the amazing thing is that on paper, this sounds like the exact same campy story the franchise is known for, but the movie actually takes it seriously, and to my genuine surprise, it succeeded. The portrayal and explanation of this story was really well done, to the point that I was actually invested, and for Power Rangers to have that effect on me is unbelievable, and something I would never have comprehended. Now that being said, when Zordon shows up, there are hints of silliness incorporated into the story, but it never feels like it's overshadowing the serious tone too much. So yeah, unbelievably, the story is actually genuinely better in quality in the 2017 Power Rangers as opposed to the pure cheesiness from the 1995 version. Now the characters in this movie are your typical flat, Saved by the Bell teenagers. None of them are interesting, and they are all corny as hell. In just the first 6 minutes alone, I felt like I had digested so much cheese that I actually felt sick. And their dialogue, oh my god, their dialogue. It has cheesier one-liners than the Adam West Batman series. In the 2017 movie, however, the characters surprisingly have a lot more depth to them. They seem like legitimately nice people, but they also have their own individual problems and vulnerabilities, and that makes them feel closer to real people. And I love how Billy, the Blue Ranger, was autistic. This could have so easily been offensive, but I thought it was utilized in a very mature manner. The only problem though is that their dialogue ranges from decent to terrible, and that's where the fault goes to the material this is based on. In many ways, these characters are too good for Power Rangers, and the movie is clearly trying to cater to both new viewers and fans of the show, and it doesn't mesh. As a result, the characters we get are good, but they aren't able to reach their full potential. As for Alpha 5, I thought he was completely annoying in the original. How the hell C-3PO gets a ton of online flack, but this thing is barely spoken of, I will never know. And he looks like a character taken right out of the Teletubbies. In the 2017 movie, on the other hand, he was quite funny and surprisingly badass. In his first encounter with the teenagers, that is. After his awesome opening scene, I was expecting him to be a great comic relief, but instead he became annoying at times, especially when he wouldn't shut up. But on the whole, when he wasn't used for comedy, I really liked his alterations. And very quickly, let's talk about Zordon. Both versions are very similar, but I will tell you right now that I far preferred Bryan Cranston from the new Power Rangers movie. The reason why is because, first of all, it's Bryan Cranston, and second, he's an alien, not a robot, and I find him to be quite stiff and emotionless in the original movie, whereas in the reboot, he actually has a personality and even a motivation. And all in all, I enjoyed watching him on screen far more than the 1995 version. So with that said, the characters are far more fleshed out and interesting in the 2017 Power Rangers movie. I know next to nothing about the Power Rangers, including their villains, but this movie literally throws what I can assume is all the show's most popular villains into one movie. And even I have got to admit that they are fun with regards to how uniquely silly and over the top they are. My favourite is this Shredder wannabe, although I call him a wannabe, but he is much more entertaining than the movie version at the time.
After 2,000 years of searching, you are finally within my grasp. And now, let's crack this egg!
This also includes Rita, who up until this point I had only heard about, so I was intrigued to see what this movie would do with both of them. The only problem is that both he and Rita only have a couple of scenes in the movie, and then they are imprisoned throughout the duration of the film's runtime, and then they have a very short mid-credit scene. So yeah, that was a disappointment. The film primarily focuses on this original villain that, to my knowledge, was created specifically for the movie. This guy is called Ivan Ooze, and I don't know about you guys, but in his very first scene, he reminds me so much of the Penguin from Batman Returns.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Ooze is back!
And after that, he actually switches between so many different personas in a matter of seconds. He kind of reminds me of Christopher Lloyd's various hammy performances, but if I had to typecast one, I would go for Uncle Fester from the Addams Family.
Inconceivable. The Power Rangers.
And yes, that does mean this guy is a ton of fun. As you would expect, his performance is unbelievably over the top. He is a terrible villain, but he is the best choice for this type of material. But to me, he is the all-encompassing example as to why people like Power Rangers, and it's because of him I was able to fully understand. Now, the villain for the new Power Rangers is Rita, and man, talk about the biggest overhaul for a villain that originated from a kid's TV show. Everything about this character in the first 75% of the movie is very reminiscent to that of a horror movie. Even the violence is. She actually uses her claw-like hands to rip people's teeth out. It's a bit messed up, actually. If I had any complaints, it's that in the last 25% of the movie, she starts to act very corny, and she completely loses the intimidation factor that she had in the first 3/4 of the film, and reverts back to the same crappy Rita from the original show. And that clashes really hard with the awesome horror element of her character, and it felt like a complete betrayal of everything new this movie did with her character. And yes, it's true, she does say Krispy Kreme more times than she should. However, I think this has been blown way out of proportion. In many reviews, I've seen people say that Krispy Kreme is said like more than a dozen times, when really it was only uttered 4 times in a couple seconds. Now, I will admit, she does eat a frickin' Krispy Kreme donut, and that was unacceptable a product placement as you can get. But with regards to the actual Krispy Kreme name, it was severely exaggerated by reviewers. In fact, I was surprised that nobody even once talked about the whole crowd of people who took out their Samsung Galaxy Note smartphones to take pictures of the Power Rangers. That was an even more blatant demonstration of product placement, more so than the Krispy Kreme. So yeah, even with her problems, the villain in the new Power Rangers is far better than the original, and I would just like to put it out there. It is so embarrassing that a Power Rangers villain is far superior to all the villains from the Marvel Extended Universe films. I mean, seriously Marvel, you better not mess up with Michael Keaton as Vulture. And no, I haven't forgotten. Let's talk about the other villain in both movies, Goldar. Oh man, that's so... Oh man. It's a tie, they both suck. 17 minutes into the 1995 movie, we get to see the Power Rangers fight, and the action, as you would expect, is incredibly fake. At times you can notice that it clearly has been choreographed, and most of the other times it seems improvised by the stunt coordinators and the costumes. And as the fights unfold, you simultaneously hear the Rangers spew out a bunch of corny one-liners. So yeah, the action is very cheesy, but then it takes it even further with bizarre shit like this. So yeah, the action is fake and is not what I would call good, but much like the show, that's part of where the charm lies. And at the very least, the movie did stay true to what worked with the shows, so it's safe while simultaneously staying true to its roots. Now in the remake, the action is very minimal. In fact, the only action scene is in the climax, and yes, we will address that later. Now funnily enough, the action was okay. I enjoyed it enough for the first 5 minutes, but after that I started to get bored of it. And the reason why is because this is clearly a payoff for the fans. Whereas the rest of the film is great at investing those who didn't watch Power Rangers, the final action scene is designed from the ground up for those who watched the original. Although I wasn't too keen on the action, it was not a rip-off of Michael Bay's Transformers, which was actually a fear of mine going in. And this movie actually takes a hit at Transformers, and I love that it did that. It felt like the filmmakers were trying to give us a subliminal message saying, yeah, don't worry, you're in good hands, we ain't doing what Michael Bay did. So even though I wasn't keen on the action, I was able to sit through it just fine. And yeah, I'm pretty sure you all saw this coming. The 2017 Power Rangers wins this round. The first thing that stood out to me, other than the cheesy characters, was the poor special effects. I mean, I know this movie is trying to stay loyal to its cheesy roots, but still, these effects are way too cheap. What's worse is the scenes that are made entirely out of CGI. These are some of the worst graphics I have ever seen in my life. The practical costumes and stuff, although incredibly cheap, do have their own charm to them, but looking at CG that was dated even when this movie came out is unacceptable. And I could go on about the characters being bad, but that's a major part of where the charm of this series comes from, so I will let it pass. With the exception of this one character. There is this hooded figure that is shown to be following the Power Rangers for a very brief period of time, and once the figure sees they are in trouble, he reveals himself, and what the heck? The he is a she, and this was meant for kids, right? Her dialogue is also a lot cornier than all the Power Rangers combined. She can also turn into an owl. Harry Potter did it better. Also, I know this is a staple of the Power Rangers, but the constant flips they do really drives me crazy. Even as a kid, I could always tell that the flips are meant to camouflage the fact that not much is going on with the fight choreography. So throw in a few flips and combine them with a kick sometimes and there's your action scene. Now there are many other problems I have with this movie, but the ones I have already discussed constantly and mercilessly occur throughout the entire film, and it really drags it down. And as for the bad stuff in the reboot, as I mentioned, the dialogue fluctuates in quality, as do the jokes, and the Samsung product placement in the end was absolutely atrocious. And last but not least, the biggest problem of this movie was that the Power Rangers only show up in the film's climax. And for an origin story, that is bloody ridiculous. Movies like Batman Begins, Iron Man, Captain America, Man of Steel, and even X-Men Origins Wolverine all have their hero show up in the middle of the film or even before that. Not in the last 20 minutes. I mean, that is disgraceful. I tell ya, if I was a kid, I would be pissed off by this. And to add salt to the wound, much like Venom from Spider-Man 3, they withdraw their faceplates way too much. This movie also has just one action scene in the climax, and that's it. For a franchise that is known for its non-stop action sequences, this feels really counterproductive. So overall, watching both of these Power Rangers movies has been an education for me. Although I was not the target audience as a kid, I do see and understand the appeal this would have had to kids back in the day. But still, the Power Rangers kind of reminds me of Mortal Kombat Annihilation with its pacing, its numerous action scenes, and of course, the non-stop amount of flips. In many ways, I do appreciate that this movie is a more cinematic version of the low-budget TV show, but I still think they could have made the production value look more grand. As is, it just looks like a slightly more expensive version of the TV show. As for the reboot, it blew my expectations out of the water. I was expecting a boring cash grab in a similar fashion to Michael Bay's Transformers, but instead, I got something that has some legitimate effort and talent put into it. The opening shot alone, where you see one of the Rangers dragging themselves through the water which eventually turns into mud, was shot absolutely beautifully in one take. And the main characters, along with the darker tone and the much darker approach to the villain, are all welcome. In a strange way, I'm actually kind of envious of you Power Rangers fans. I would have liked one of my childhood shows to get a more serious movie like this, but alas, I don't see that happening. So, on to the scores. The 1995 Power Rangers gets a 3 out of 10, and the Power Rangers reboot gets a 7. In the comments below, I want you to tell me whether you watched Power Rangers back in the day and what you thought of the reboot. Did it meet your expectations, or did it take too many liberties and change too much? Be sure to let me know. Also, please do remember that I have a Patreon page, and if you donate, you'll be able to have scheduled monthly Skype chats with me about a movie I've covered or anything else you fancy talking about. Also, please do make sure to share this video, as that really does help. Thanks again for watching, guys, and I will catch all of you next time. Take care.